The storm outside was relentless. Dark clouds rolled across the sky like an approaching army, and the wind howled as it battered the windows of the mansion. James Westbrook stood in his study, his tall frame tense, his eyes narrowed as he stared out over the vast estate. The mansion, perched high on the cliffs, had always been his sanctuary. A place where he could escape the world, until now. His thoughts were scattered, a jumbled mess of unanswered questions and uneasy feelings. It had only been hours since Ella, his new housekeeper, had arrived. He had hired her on a whim, seeing the ad in the local paper and thinking she'd be the perfect addition to his quiet, solitary life. She was quiet, efficient, and unassuming, a perfect match for the role. But there was something else, something strange about her that he couldn't put his finger on. It wasn't the way she spoke or carried herself. It wasn't even her modest appearance. It was the bracelet. It had caught his eye almost immediately. It wasn't the kind of accessory he would expect from someone like her. The bracelet was old, crafted from silver that shimmered in the dim light, with intricate patterns that seemed to hold meaning. But it wasn't the craftsmanship that struck him. No, it was the sense of familiarity that gnawed at him. There was something about it that seemed wrong. As though he had seen it before, somewhere, in another time. James had dismissed the feeling as a fleeting thought, a product of his overactive imagination. After all, he was a businessman, not a detective. But now, hours later, the storm raging outside only heightened the unease settling in his chest. He needed answers, and for the first time in years, he felt a prickling sense of unease, as though he were on the cusp of discovering something he wasn't ready for. The soft sound of footsteps broke through his thoughts. He turned, his gaze locking on Ella as she stepped into the room. Her presence was almost ethereal, as if she belonged in a different time altogether. She wore the same plain, modest clothes she had arrived in, a simple blouse and skirt, nothing extravagant or out of place. But it wasn't the clothes that caught his attention now. It was the bracelet. The way the silver gleamed under the flickering lights of the study, the way it seemed almost alive, pulsing with some hidden energy. He couldn't look away. His heart skipped a beat, a feeling of recognition flooding through him. His thoughts raced as he tried to place where he had seen something so similar before. Ella's eyes flickered nervously as she caught his gaze, and for a brief moment, her face seemed to tighten with unease. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a subtle gesture that only increased the tension in the room. She was aware of the bracelet's effect on him. That much was clear. "Is everything all right?" she asked in a soft, almost hesitant tone. James swallowed, his mind still reeling. He could feel the weight of the silence stretching between them, the unanswered questions hanging in the air like a thick fog. He could tell she wasn't comfortable under his scrutiny, but he couldn't help himself. There was something about that bracelet that called to him. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a symbol of something far darker, far more complicated than he could imagine. "I've seen that bracelet before," he said, his voice steady but his insides twisting. "Where did you get it?" Ella's eyes widened slightly, and her hand instinctively moved to cover the bracelet, her fingers brushing over the intricate design. She hesitated for a moment, as though weighing her words carefully. "It's a family heirloom," she replied, her voice quieter now, almost as if she were trying to convince herself as much as him. "It's been passed down for generations." James didn't buy it. There was more to the story, something she wasn't telling him. His gut told him to press further, to dig into whatever secret she was hiding. He had learned to trust his instincts in business. Why should this be any different? "Family heirloom, huh?" James muttered, walking closer to her, his eyes locked on the bracelet. "Why does it feel so familiar?" Ella flinched, her gaze darting to the window, where the storm outside raged with renewed fury. The air in the room grew thick with tension, the kind that preceded a storm far worse than the one outside. Ella began, but she was cut off by a loud crash of thunder, the force of it rattling the windows and making the entire house shake. She flinched, her eyes wide, her lips pressed tightly together. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the howling wind outside and the occasional creak of the house settling. James took a step closer to her, his heart racing. Something was off. Something was wrong. And Ella was at the center of it. "Ella," he said, his voice lower now, a tone that was more demanding than he intended. "What are you hiding?" Ella took a shaky breath, her fingers tightening around the bracelet, her face paling. She didn't meet his eyes. Instead, she looked down at the bracelet, almost as if she were searching for something in its design, some kind of answer that wasn't there. "It's nothing," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "It's just a bracelet." James could see the lie in her eyes. He could feel the weight of it hanging in the air, pressing down on both of them. He reached out, his hand hovering near her wrist, drawn to the bracelet as if by some invisible force. Ella's eyes widened in panic, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she stepped back, her back pressed against the wall as if she were trying to distance herself from him, from the truth. "I don't think it's just a bracelet," James said, his voice sharp. "What's its real story, Ella? Why does it look like it's been locked away for decades?" Her breathing quickened. The room seemed to close in on them, the storm outside now matching the turmoil within. Ella's eyes flickered to the door, as if considering running, but then her shoulders slumped in defeat. It's not just a family heirloom," she said, her voice trembling. "It's part of something bigger. Something I can't explain." James's heart skipped a beat. The words hung in the air, each one heavier than the last. Something bigger? What could that mean? And why was she so afraid to tell him? Before he could ask another question, Ella turned abruptly and rushed toward the door. "I need to go," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't stay here anymore." James watched in stunned silence as she disappeared through the door, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. He stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. What had she meant? What was she hiding? And why was she so terrified of him finding out? The storm raged on outside, but James's mind was swirling with thoughts far darker than the weather. He couldn't let this go. He had to find out the truth. The storm did not relent. For hours, the rain battered against the windows of the mansion, its sound a constant, deafening reminder of the chaos outside. But inside, the house was eerily quiet, save for the occasional creak of the old wood. James Westbrook stood motionless in the study, his mind racing, his thoughts tumbling over one another. The strange behavior of his new housekeeper, Ella, and the mysterious bracelet were consuming his every thought. Why had she fled? What was she hiding? He stared at the door she had exited through, his fingers tapping restlessly on the polished wood of his desk. His gaze shifted back to the window, where the storm had turned the once peaceful landscape into a swirling blur of gray. The night felt long, suffocating, and the questions hanging in the air were far heavier than the storm itself. What was it about that bracelet that made her so afraid? Why was it so familiar to him? His hand hovered over the drawer where his old family photo albums were stored. He didn't often look through them, too many memories, too many ghosts. But tonight, something pulled him toward it, a gnawing need to understand. To find answers. James pulled open the drawer and sifted through the albums, flipping through the thick pages of yellowed photographs. There were pictures of his parents, of family gatherings long since past, of moments frozen in time. But one photograph stopped him cold. It was a black and white photo of his grandmother, standing proudly with a group of people. The photo was taken at some formal gathering, perhaps a wedding or anniversary. James had seen this photo countless times, but tonight, his eyes were drawn to something he had never noticed before. A woman in the back of the photo, just barely visible, was wearing the same bracelet. The same intricate, silver design, the same odd patterns that seemed to pulse with energy. His heart skipped a beat. How had he never seen this before? He leaned closer, studying the photo. The woman was standing with a man, his grandfather, James presumed, though her face was partially obscured. But there was no mistaking the bracelet. He had seen it on Ella's wrist only hours ago, and now it appeared in this photograph from decades ago. James felt a chill creep up his spine. There was no way this could be a coincidence. But who was the woman in the photo, and how was she connected to the bracelet? More importantly, why had Ella been wearing it? And why had she reacted the way she did when he mentioned it? His mind raced as he began flipping through more albums, desperately searching for more clues. But as the storm raged on, his thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and unmistakable. He turned sharply, his heart pounding as the door creaked open. It was Ella. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed as if she had been crying. Her hair, once neatly tucked behind her ear, now hung loosely around her face. She looked exhausted, drained, as though she hadn't slept in days. But what struck James the most was the way she was looking at him. There was fear in her eyes, but there was also something else. Something that told him she knew she couldn't keep running anymore. Ella closed the door softly behind her and stood there, her hands trembling at her sides. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the distant thunder and the relentless pounding of the rain. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to run. It's just, this is all too much. I never wanted to drag you into this." James stood, his emotions a tangle of confusion and anger. "Ella," he said, his voice steady but edged with urgency, "you have to tell me what's going on. What is this bracelet? Why did you leave like that?" She swallowed hard, glancing down at her wrist where the bracelet still rested. She didn't move to cover it this time. Perhaps she had resigned herself to the fact that he had already seen it. There was no point in hiding anymore. "This bracelet," Ella began, her voice shaking, "has been in my family for generations. It's not just an heirloom, it's a key. A key to something much bigger, something that we've been protecting for years." James's pulse quickened. "A key? What are you talking about? What does that even mean?" Ella took a deep breath, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. "My family, my real family, not the one I've been living with, has been guarding a secret. A secret about this bracelet. And now it's my turn. I don't know if I'm ready for this, but I can't keep running from it anymore." James stepped forward, his mind racing. "What secret? And what does this have to do with me?" Ella looked at him for a long moment, as though debating whether she should continue. Finally, she spoke. "Have you ever heard of the Ashford legacy?" she asked softly. James froze, the name sending a ripple of recognition through him. The Ashford family had been one of the oldest and most influential families in the region. They were known for their vast wealth and their mysterious ties to powerful organizations. But their history was also shrouded in mystery. Many people believed the Ashfords had ties to ancient, secretive societies, and some even whispered that they had played a role in the founding of certain influential institutions. "Of course," James replied, though he felt a sense of unease settle over him. "Everyone knows the Ashford name. But what does that have to do with you?" Ella swallowed, her eyes darkening as she spoke. "My real name isn't Ella. It's Lila Ashford. I'm the last living heir to the Ashford family. And this bracelet," she held up her wrist, "is the symbol of our family's legacy. It's a key to a hidden vault, a place that holds something so powerful, it could change everything." James stared at her, his mind reeling. "A hidden vault? What's inside it? And why did you run?" Ella's face twisted with anguish. "I didn't run because of the vault. I ran because there are people who will stop at nothing to get their hands on what's inside. My family has been hiding it for generations, and now they know I've found it. They won't stop coming after me until they have it." The room felt like it was closing in around him. The weight of her words sank in. Everything he had known, everything he thought he understood about his world, was shifting, cracking open like the storm outside. "Who are these people?" James asked, his voice low. "And what's inside the vault?" Ella shook her head, her eyes full of despair. "I can't say. Not yet. But I promise you, it's more than just treasure. It's something that could change the course of history." She looked at him, pleading with her eyes. "I didn't want you to be involved in this. I never wanted you to find out. But now that you know, now that you've seen the bracelet, you're a part of it too." James took a deep breath, his mind whirling with the magnitude of what she had just revealed. He was no longer a mere bystander in this strange, dangerous game. He was caught up in it. Whether he liked it or not, he was in this now. As if on cue, the lights in the study flickered and dimmed, casting eerie shadows across the room. Then, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway, growing louder, drawing closer. Someone was coming. "Stay here," Ella whispered urgently, her voice a frantic hush. "They've found us." James's heart pounded in his chest as the door creaked open once again. The door creaked open slowly, the hinges groaning as if reluctant to let whatever was coming in. James's heart pounded in his chest as he turned toward the sound, his mind racing. Ella, or rather, Lila Ashford, stood frozen beside him, her hand trembling as she reached for the edge of the desk. Her eyes were wide with terror, her breath shallow. "They've found us," she whispered again, her voice barely audible, the panic evident in her words. The room seemed to shrink as the seconds stretched into eternity. The weight of her statement settled heavily over both of them, filling the air with a sense of dread. James had barely processed the bombshell revelation she had dropped on him, that she was Lila Ashford, the last heir to a powerful, secretive family, when the door opened wider, revealing the shadowed figure of a man standing just outside. The storm outside, which had raged for hours, now seemed distant compared to the storm of tension building in the study. The man was tall, dressed in dark clothing that blended into the shadows. His face was obscured, but the coldness in his eyes, when they briefly caught the dim light, sent a chill down James's spine. This man was not here for a friendly conversation. "You're not safe here, Lila," the man said, his voice low and controlled, like the calm before a storm. "It's over. You've been running long enough." James took a protective step in front of Ella, or Lila, as he now knew her, instinctively. His mind raced, but all he could think about was keeping her safe. Who was this man? What did he want? Lila's body tensed beside him, and he could feel the fear radiating off her. "I won't let you take me," she said, her voice barely a whisper but filled with a defiance James hadn't expected. "You won't find it. The vault is hidden. You'll never get it." The man laughed softly, almost mockingly. "You still don't understand, do you? We've been watching you, Lila. The vault won't stay hidden forever. We'll find it, with or without your help." James's mind was reeling. The vault. The power it supposedly held. It was no longer just an abstract mystery, it was a living, breathing threat, and it was clear that Lila had been trying to keep its existence buried. But now, the threat had found her, and with it, the stakes had escalated beyond anything James could have imagined. "I won't let you," Lila repeated, her voice firm this time, though her hands shook at her sides. "I can't let you have it. It's too dangerous." The man took a step forward, and James instinctively moved to block his path. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice louder than he had intended. "What do you want from her?" The man's eyes flicked toward James, narrowing with contempt. "Stay out of this, Mr. Westbrook. This doesn't concern you." His voice carried a chilling finality that sent a shiver down James's spine. "But if you're smart, you'll leave. Go back to your comfortable life, and pretend none of this ever happened. If you don't, we'll make sure it does." James stood his ground. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere. If this has anything to do with Lila, it concerns me." Lila placed a hand on his arm, her touch light but insistent. "James, don't," she said urgently. "You don't know what you're dealing with." The man chuckled, his voice icy. "You see? She's already warning you. There's no turning back from this. If you stay, you're as good as dead." James looked down at Lila, her eyes wide with fear but also something else, a silent plea. He could see the weight of her burden, the years of running, of hiding, and it was clear that this was far bigger than anything he had imagined. The threats, the cryptic talk of the vault, the danger that now surrounded them, it was all too much, and yet, something inside him told him that leaving wasn't an option. He could see the look of defeat in her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged with the weight of the world. She had been carrying this secret alone for too long. She couldn't bear it anymore. "I'm not going anywhere, Lila," James said softly, but with resolve. "You don't have to do this alone." Her gaze flickered to him, and for a moment, it seemed as though she wanted to argue, to push him away for his own safety. But then her expression softened, and she gave a single nod, a reluctant acceptance of his decision. She knew there was no turning back for either of them now. The man's smile faded, and he took another step forward, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. "Very well," he said with a cold shrug. "You've made your choice. But know this, Mr. Westbrook, if you choose to stay, you're stepping into a game much older, much darker than you realize. You'll never leave the way you came in." James met the man's cold, calculating gaze. There was something unsettling about him, something that told James this wasn't just a criminal or hired muscle. This man was part of something much bigger, something with deep roots and far-reaching influence. "I'm not afraid of you," James replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Inside, however, his heart was hammering. He didn't know what he was up against, but he wouldn't back down. Not now, not when he could see how much Lila was suffering. The man's smile returned, but it was a thin, cruel thing. "You will be," he said simply. "In time." Before James could respond, the man turned on his heel and strode out of the room, the door slamming shut behind him. The air seemed to lose its weight, but the silence that followed was suffocating. James exhaled sharply, his hands clenching into fists. "Who the hell was that?" he asked, turning to Lila, his voice a mix of frustration and fear. Lila was staring at the door, her face pale, her body trembling. "That was Gabriel Moretti," she said, her voice barely audible. "He works for them, the people who have been hunting me." "Who are they?" James pressed, though he felt as if he already knew the answer. "And why are they after you?" Lila's eyes filled with sorrow, and for a moment, she seemed to withdraw into herself. The walls she had carefully constructed around her emotions began to crack. "I told you about the Ashford legacy," she said softly, her voice breaking. "It's not just about wealth or power. It's about a secret so dangerous, it could destroy everything. People like Gabriel, they want to control it. They want to find the vault and unlock its power, but they don't understand what it truly is. They think it's a treasure. They think it's something they can use to control the world. But it's much worse than that." James stepped closer, his heart aching at the raw vulnerability in her voice. "What's in the vault, Lila? What's so dangerous that they would kill to get their hands on it?" She shook her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know everything. My family's kept it hidden for generations. But I do know this, it's not a treasure. It's a weapon, James. A weapon so powerful that if it's unlocked, it could change the course of history. And once it's out, it can never be put back." James felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had known that there was something big about all of this, something larger than just a family heirloom and a hidden vault. But now, hearing Lila's words, he understood the magnitude of the danger they were facing. "Then we have to stop them," James said, his voice filled with determination. "We have to find the vault before they do." Lila nodded slowly, though her expression was one of deep conflict. "I want to stop them. I do. But it's not that simple. The vault isn't just hidden. It's protected, and the only way to access it is through the bracelet. The key. I'm the only one who can open it, but I can't do it alone." James looked at her, his mind racing. "Then we'll do it together," he said, his voice resolute. "We'll find it before they do. And we'll make sure it stays hidden." But even as he said the words, a nagging doubt settled in his chest. Gabriel Moretti's words echoed in his mind. "You'll never leave the way you came in." What had they really stepped into? And could they ever truly escape it once they were in too deep? The air in the mansion had grown thick with unease, and every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the windows, seemed to echo the tension that had settled in the walls. It was as though the very house had become a prison, trapping James and Lila in a web they hadn't fully comprehended yet. The storm outside had long since turned into a steady drizzle, but the true storm, the one they faced, was just beginning. Lila, her face pale and drawn, stood near the study window, staring out into the bleak, fog-covered landscape. James, meanwhile, sat at the desk, the open drawers before him filled with old photographs, letters, and mementos, each piece of the Ashford family's past offering clues, but also posing new questions. "This is it, isn't it?" James said, his voice quiet as he leafed through one of the family albums. "The truth that you've been running from your whole life." Lila turned to face him, her expression somber. "Yes," she said, her voice heavy. "I never wanted to involve anyone in this. I thought I could bury it forever. But now I see there's no way out." James stood up, walking toward her. His heart ached for her. This was no longer just a story of a secret heirloom or a hidden vault, it was a battle for survival, a fight against an unknown, faceless enemy who seemed to know more about her family's history than she did. "We'll figure this out," he said softly, though he wasn't sure how. "But we need to know more. We need answers. Who are these people chasing you? Why are they after the vault?" Lila's eyes flickered, and for a moment, it was as though she was seeing something from her past that she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge in years. She shook her head. "I never wanted you to be dragged into this, James. I wanted to protect you from all of it. But now you know too much. I can't pretend anymore." James reached out, gently taking her arm, urging her to meet his gaze. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm in this with you. We need to uncover the whole truth. Only then can we stop them." She hesitated, then nodded slowly, her expression shifting from fear to a steely determination. "All right," she said, her voice unwavering. "You want to know everything? Then you need to understand what this is all really about." She motioned toward the photo albums that littered the desk, and James leaned in as she flipped open one of the pages, revealing a series of pictures from decades ago, some faded with age, others slightly crinkled from years of handling. But it wasn't the pictures that caught James's attention. It was the old, handwritten letter tucked between the pages. Lila reached for it, unfolding it carefully. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, yet the words it contained sent a chill down his spine. "The Ashford legacy will survive, even if we must leave our bloodline to the shadows. The vault, as dangerous as it is, will be hidden until the world is ready. Only one will carry the key to unlock it, and that is the one who holds the bracelet. But beware, there are forces greater than us that will stop at nothing to gain control of what's inside. If they succeed, the world will never be the same." James's breath caught in his throat. "What does it mean? Who wrote this?" Lila took a deep breath, her fingers trembling as she held the letter. "That letter was written by my great-grandfather. He was the last to hide the vault, the one who made sure it stayed hidden from the world. My family has been guarding it ever since, keeping the key safe with the bracelet. But not everyone in the Ashford family was loyal. There were factions, secret alliances, and some of them, they've been looking for the vault for generations. James stepped back, trying to process the gravity of the words. The idea of a vault so powerful it could change the world was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The fact that Lila was connected to it, as its last living heir, made her a target, an unwilling pawn in a centuries-old game. Who are these factions? Who's after you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lila's face darkened, and she closed her eyes briefly, as if summoning the courage to speak. There's a group called the Blackthorn Order. They've been hunting us for generations. They believe the power of the vault can be used to reshape the world. They want control of it, but they don't understand what they're dealing with. If they get their hands on the vault, they'll unleash something so dangerous, so uncontrollable, that it could bring about the end of everything. James felt a cold shiver run down his spine. And Moretti? Gabriel Moretti, what's his role in all of this? Lila's eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a flicker of regret in them. He works for the Blackthorn Order, she said quietly. He's one of their top operatives. They've been using him to track me, to find the vault. He's ruthless, and he's been trained for this his whole life. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. James clenched his fists, anger rising within him. The thought of Moretti, a cold, calculating man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, coming after Lila made his blood boil. She had already suffered so much, and now this. He couldn't let her face this alone. We won't let him get to you, James said firmly. We'll find the vault before he does. We'll make sure it stays hidden, just like your great-grandfather intended. Lila looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to gauge whether his resolve was as unshakable as it seemed. You don't understand, James. The vault is protected in ways you can't even imagine. It's not just a physical place, it's something much more. The key, the bracelet, is only part of it. There are riddles, codes, and trials to get through. Even if we find the vault, there's no guarantee we'll be able to open it. It's been hidden for a reason. James took a deep breath, steadying himself. We'll figure it out together. You're not alone in this. You never will be. She smiled faintly, her eyes still clouded with doubt. I hope you're right. As they stood there, the weight of the secret they were now sharing pressing down on both of them, a loud knock echoed through the door. Both of them froze. James. Lila, a voice called from the hallway. It was Arthur, the mansion's longtime caretaker. There's someone here to see you. James exchanged a glance with Lila. Who is it? He called out, trying to mask the unease creeping into his voice. It's someone you'll want to meet, Arthur replied, his voice tinged with urgency. Lila's expression shifted from confusion to wariness. I don't like this, she whispered. I know, James replied, walking toward the door. Stay behind me. He opened the door, and Arthur stood there, his face grim. Behind him stood a tall woman, dressed in a long black coat, her face obscured by a large, dark hat. She stepped forward, revealing sharp features and piercing blue eyes. There was something about her, something unsettling. This is Maya Locke, Arthur said quietly, stepping aside to let her in. She's been looking for you, Lila. Lila's face went pale. Maya? Her voice shook. What are you doing here? Maya's lips curled into a thin smile. I'm here to help you, she said, her voice smooth, almost too smooth. But only if you're willing to listen. James's instincts flared. There was something about Maya that didn't sit right with him. Her calm demeanor felt like a mask, hiding something far more dangerous. He stepped closer to Lila, putting a hand on her arm. What does she mean? James asked, his voice low. Maya glanced at him, her eyes cool and calculating. "You have no idea what you're in the middle of, do you?" she said. "But don't worry. I'm here to make sure Lila survives. Because if she doesn't, everything we've all worked for will be lost." Lila turned to James, her face pale, her lips trembling. "You can't trust her," she said. "I don't know what she's involved in, but—" Before she could finish, Maya stepped forward, her gaze locking with Lila's. "You've been running long enough, Lila. You can't hide forever. But you also can't face this alone. You need allies, whether you like it or not." James felt a knot form in his stomach. Maya Locke was more than just a mysterious stranger. She was part of something far bigger, and whatever she wanted from Lila, it wasn't going to be simple or safe. The mansion, once a symbol of safety and solitude, now felt like a cage, its walls closing in with every passing hour. The cold rain still lashed against the windows, but inside, the air was thick with tension. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every creak of the floorboards felt like footsteps of those who sought to end their struggle. Lila stood by the window again, staring out into the rain, her back to James. She hadn't said a word since Maya Locke's unsettling arrival, and the silence between them had become unbearable. The woman, Maya, had left just as abruptly as she had come, her cryptic words lingering in the air like a poison. "I'm here to help you," she had said. "But only if you're willing to listen." And that was where the problem lay. Lila hadn't been willing to listen. She hadn't trusted Maya then, and the feeling only grew as the hours passed. Something about the woman seemed too calculated, too composed. And yet, Lila knew that James would need more than just her if they were to make it out of this alive. The Blackthorn Order was relentless, and Gabriel Moretti was more than just a henchman, he was a skilled hunter who wouldn't stop until he had the vault. James stood by the desk, his fingers lightly tracing the edges of a faded letter. He had tried to get some rest, but his mind was racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was lurking just outside their reach. The more he learned about the Ashford family legacy, the more the truth seemed to slip through his fingers. Lila's voice broke the silence. "You should leave, James. You don't understand what's happening. You don't know what you're up against." He turned to look at her. She still had her back to him, but he could hear the tremble in her voice. "I'm not leaving, Lila. We're in this together. You know that." She finally turned around, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and desperation. "You don't know what you're dealing with. It's not just about the vault anymore. It's about everything, everything that my family has kept hidden for generations. The Blackthorn Order, they have connections everywhere. They control things you couldn't even begin to understand." James stepped closer to her, his voice soft but firm. "I don't care what they control. I don't care about their connections. I care about you. And I'm not going anywhere." Lila closed her eyes, her shoulders slumping as though the weight of the world had just fallen on them both. She reached up to rub her temples, a gesture of frustration and helplessness. "James, you don't know what's inside that vault. It's not a treasure, it's not even a weapon. It's worse. And once they find it, once they unlock it, nothing will stop them from using it." James's mind spun, trying to make sense of her words. "What is it, Lila? What's so dangerous?" She shook her head, her eyes filled with a profound sorrow. "I can't tell you everything. But I'll tell you this, the vault is not what people think. It doesn't contain gold or riches, but something far more powerful. My family didn't hide it because of its value, they hid it because of what it could do. They feared what it could unleash." James could feel his heart pounding in his chest. "But you're the only one who can unlock it. You said it yourself. You're the key." She nodded, her lips trembling. "Yes, but even I don't fully understand how. The bracelet, the key, it's not just a simple lock. The vault, it's not a place, James. It's an idea. A concept. And once it's unlocked, it will change everything. The room seemed to grow colder as she spoke. James could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had thought they were just trying to survive, just trying to stop Moretti from getting his hands on the vault. But now, it was clear that the stakes were far higher than either of them could have imagined. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a loud bang, a sharp knock at the front door. Both of them froze, and for a moment, the world outside seemed to vanish. Lila's eyes widened in terror, and James felt a chill run down his spine. Whoever was at that door wasn't there to negotiate. "I'll go," James said quietly, already moving toward the door. He couldn't explain why, but he knew, deep down, that this was no ordinary knock. His instincts were screaming at him to prepare for something terrible. Lila grabbed his arm before he could reach the door. "No, James. You don't understand. If it's them. If it's the Blackthorn Order, they'll have no mercy." James squeezed her hand, trying to reassure her. "Stay here," he said. "I won't let them take you." With a final, lingering look at Lila, James opened the door. Standing in the doorway was a man, tall, with sharp features and dark eyes that gleamed with something unsettling. His presence was intimidating, and there was no mistaking that he wasn't here to chat. He was dressed in a black suit, his tie perfectly knotted, and he held a briefcase in his hand. The man stepped forward, his gaze unwavering as he looked at James, and then to Lila, who had quietly followed him to the door. "James Westbrook, I presume," the man said, his voice smooth, with a hint of malice. "I'm sure you're aware that this is no longer a game. It's a matter of survival." James didn't flinch, though his heart was pounding. "And you are?" The man gave a cold smile, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "My name is Nathaniel Blackwood. And I'm here to make sure Lila Ashford doesn't get any further." James's blood ran cold. Blackwood. The name rang a bell. One of the top operatives in the Blackthorn Order. A man who was as dangerous as Gabriel Moretti, but far more calculated. "I'm afraid this is where you get off, Mr. Westbrook," Blackwood continued, his voice calm but lethal. "You've helped Lila enough. Now, step aside. We're taking her." Lila stepped forward, her face a mask of defiance. "You won't take me," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Not without a fight." James stood firm, positioning himself between Blackwood and Lila. "You'll have to go through me first." Blackwood's smile deepened. "I was hoping you'd say that. This is where it gets interesting, Mr. Westbrook." Suddenly, without warning, Blackwood opened the briefcase in his hands and revealed a set of documents, thick, official-looking papers, sealed with a red stamp. He held them out to James. "These are the papers that will make all this much easier," Blackwood said. "Sign them. And we'll leave. No harm done." James glanced at the papers, but something inside him told him not to trust them. It was too easy. Too clean. He couldn't let his guard down, not for a second. "No deal," James said, his voice low and firm. Blackwood's smile faltered for a moment, but it quickly returned, colder than before. "You think you have a choice? You've been entangled in something far bigger than you realize, Mr. Westbrook. The Ashford legacy, it's not just about Lila. It's about power. It's about control. And we'll stop at nothing to get it." Lila stepped forward again, her hand reaching out to James's. "James, please," she said softly, her voice almost pleading. "We can't fight them like this. There's no way out." James felt a rush of adrenaline surge through him. He wasn't about to let her go, not now, not after everything they had been through. He couldn't back down. Not when they were so close to the truth. "We're not signing anything," James said firmly. "And you're not taking her." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still, the silence thick with tension. Then, with a quick motion, Blackwood stepped back, snapping the briefcase shut. "This isn't over," he said coldly. "You've made your choice, Mr. Westbrook. But I assure you, it's the wrong one." Before either of them could react, Blackwood turned on his heel and walked away, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. James stood there for a moment, the door still open, his hand gripping the knob so tightly that his knuckles were white. Lila was beside him now, her face pale with worry. "That was him," she whispered. "Nathaniel Blackwood. One of the Blackthorn Order's top enforcers." James's pulse was still racing. "We've made enemies now. Big ones." Lila nodded, her expression grim. "And they won't stop. Not until they have everything. Not until they have the vault." James's mind was spinning with everything they had learned, everything they had uncovered. He didn't know what the vault held, but he knew it wasn't just some family heirloom. It was far more dangerous than that. And the Blackthorn Order was closing in. They needed to act fast. The web was tightening, and the clock was ticking. The storm outside had intensified into a relentless downpour, as if the heavens themselves were mirroring the chaos that now gripped the mansion. The wind howled against the walls, and the trees outside bent as though trying to break free from the violent gusts. Inside, the air was thick with a mixture of fear, determination, and the unrelenting pressure of time. James stood by the large, cracked window of the mansion's drawing room, his hand gripping the edge of the glass as he peered out into the storm. His mind was racing, and the weight of their situation pressed down on him. He had faced danger before, but nothing like this. There were forces at play now, bigger than anything he could have anticipated. Lila, the woman who had unwittingly dragged him into this mess, was at the center of it all. And every step they had taken toward uncovering the truth had only led them deeper into the abyss. Behind him, Lila sat at the large wooden table, the map of the mansion spread out before her, her fingers tracing the lines as she muttered to herself. She had been quiet for the past few hours, her mind undoubtedly preoccupied with the same thoughts that haunted him. The clock was ticking. They knew they couldn't wait much longer before the Blackthorn Order found them again. Blackwood, Moretti, and the rest of the deadly network were still out there, closing in. And Maya Locke, had left them with more questions than answers. James turned around, locking eyes with Lila. "We need to move. Now." She nodded slowly, her expression distant, but there was a flicker of resolve in her gaze. "I know. But where do we go? The vault, it's not just something we can walk into. And we have no idea how to get to it before they do." James moved toward her, his hands pressed against the table. "You said it yourself, the vault isn't just a physical place. It's hidden inside the mansion, hidden within something. The key is the bracelet, and that's in your hands." Lila looked down at her wrist, where the bracelet still rested. The key that could unlock the most dangerous legacy in the Ashford family's history. The key that held the power to either save or destroy everything. Her fingers gently brushed against the bracelet, the weight of it heavy on her heart. "I don't even know how to use it, James," she whispered. "The puzzle is more complex than I ever imagined. It's like a riddle I can't solve." James placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. "We'll figure it out. But we need to act fast. If Blackwood gets his hands on that vault, everything changes. And if Moretti catches up with us." The thought of Gabriel Moretti, the dangerous mercenary who had been chasing them through every corner of this mansion, made James's blood run cold. Moretti wasn't just an assassin. He was an expert in tracking people down, a man who had the resources of the Blackthorn Order at his disposal. And they knew he was getting closer. Lila stood up, a sudden resolve in her eyes. "There's one place we haven't checked yet, the family crypt. It's beneath the house, and it's been sealed for generations. I didn't think it had anything to do with the vault until now." James raised an eyebrow. The crypt? How does that fit into all of this? Lila's face was grim as she moved toward the old, grand staircase. I think it's where my great-grandfather hid the final piece of the puzzle. There are ancient writings, cryptic symbols that point to it. If the vault is anything like what he described, it's linked to the crypt. That's where we'll find the answers we need. James nodded. He didn't need more convincing. Let's go. We don't have much time. The two of them descended into the bowels of the mansion, the stairs creaking underfoot. The mansion had always felt oppressive, but now it felt alive, each room, each hall, as if it were holding its breath. It was as if the house itself knew they were on the brink of something terrible, something that would forever alter its history. As they reached the basement, Lila led James to a large, iron door hidden behind old tapestries. She placed her hand against the door, the bracelet glinting in the dim light. The moment her skin made contact with the cold metal, a faint click echoed in the silence. James watched in awe as the door slowly began to creak open, revealing a long, dark corridor. It was the crypt. The final resting place of generations of Ashfords, long forgotten and sealed away from the world. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of age-old decay lingered in the musty space. Lila stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. This is where it all started. My family's legacy, their secret, this is where they kept it hidden. James followed her, his heart racing. The walls of the crypt were lined with ancient stone, each slab etched with names and dates that seemed to stretch back centuries. At the far end of the crypt stood a large stone sarcophagus, its surface covered in faded, cryptic symbols. This is it, Lila said, her voice reverberating in the stillness of the crypt. This is where the vault was hidden. James's eyes scanned the symbols etched into the sarcophagus. There was something deeply unsettling about it, the way the markings seemed to shift and change in the dim light. As if they were alive. Lila stepped forward, placing her hand on the sarcophagus. I don't know what to do next. My great-grandfather never wrote down the instructions for how to open it. He only left us with these symbols. James studied the symbols closely, his mind racing. There had to be something here that would unlock the mystery. He ran his fingers along the carvings, feeling the ridges beneath his fingertips. Then, something caught his eye, a symbol on the side of the sarcophagus that seemed out of place. It was a small, intricate engraving, almost like a lock, with a hollowed center. That's it, James said, his voice sharp with realization. It's a keyhole. Lila turned to him, her face pale. You think the bracelet? James nodded. It's the key. We need to fit it in there. Without another word, Lila removed the bracelet from her wrist and held it up to the engraving. It was a perfect fit. With a trembling hand, she slid the bracelet into the hollowed keyhole. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence hung heavy in the air. And then, with a low groan, the stone sarcophagus began to shift. The ground beneath them trembled, and the air grew colder. James took a step back, his pulse quickening. He didn't know what was about to happen, but he knew it was going to change everything. The sarcophagus cracked open, revealing a hidden compartment inside. But it wasn't gold or jewels that lay within. Instead, it was an ancient manuscript, covered in dust but still intact. The pages were yellowed with age, but the symbols and writing were clear. Lila gasped as she reached for it, her hands shaking as she held the manuscript in her hands. This is it, she whispered. This is what my family was trying to protect. The truth. James watched as she carefully opened the manuscript. The pages were filled with ancient writings, an intricate language that neither of them could read. But at the bottom of one of the pages was a drawing. A drawing that matched the symbol they had just uncovered on the sarcophagus. This is the key to unlocking the vault, Lila said, her voice filled with awe. This is the final piece of the puzzle. Suddenly, they heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching from behind them. James's hand immediately went to his side, reaching for the pistol he had tucked into his belt. He turned quickly, his heart racing as the sound grew louder. X. Then, out of the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked, and menacing. It was Gabriel Moretti. "I knew you'd make it this far," Moretti said, his voice cold and mocking. "But now it's over. Hand over the manuscript. You're not getting any further." James stepped in front of Lila, his body tense. "Not going to happen, Moretti." Moretti chuckled darkly, taking a step forward. "You think you can stop me? The Blackthorn Order doesn't lose, Westbrook. You've already lost." But as he advanced, there was a sudden, deafening crash. The walls of the crypt shook, and a blinding light filled the room. For a moment, everything went white. When the light faded, James and Lila found themselves standing in a new place, an ancient chamber, far beneath the mansion. And there, at the center of the room, stood a massive stone door. The door to the vault. But as they approached, they heard the sound of footsteps once again. Moretti wasn't alone anymore. Blackwood and the rest of the Blackthorn Order had arrived. Lila turned to James, her eyes wide with panic. "We have to act fast." James nodded, his resolve hardening. "We're not going to let them win. Not this time." With that, they stepped forward, ready to face whatever lay behind the vault door. They had come this far, and they weren't going to stop now. The final chapter was about to unfold.